Does the MNR have any initiatives in place to reintroduce species that are threatened in a given area, or is it more for maintaining the area to get the habitat back so that they can come back naturally?
Probably more the latter than the former.
Okay.
And many of the species at risk, there's all kinds of issues around reintroducing them, and it's very difficult to have good success doing that. It costs a lot of money, and the better approach is the habitat-based approach, and making sure that the habitat is there, because that's going to guarantee you the best chance of success. And there was just as a really quick example, peregrine falcons, as you may know, there was a huge introduction program that the governments all across North America, including Ontario, spent tons of money trying to reintroduce peregrine falcons. And that ended up being, there was some good successes with that. But what nature has allowed to happen now that DDT has been, processed through the environment, has been way more successful in the end. And you could argue that MNR's introductions were, by and large, in urban areas. And I think most of us would probably agree that the best place for peregrines to be, is a functioning sort of natural part of Ontario's life history would be on those cliffs. And nature's allowed that to happen. So, the habitat's there, the environment's clean, they're good to go.
Don't mess with Mother Nature.
Yeah.
Well, just in keeping with the peregrine falcons, were the problems that the peregrines have, did it affect all falcons or only peregrines? Because we have a pair of merlins that have nested near our lake for a couple of years. So were the merlins affected as well? Or?
I'm not specifically sure, but it's an interesting observation about merlins, because I was reading an article recently that, we're talking doom and gloom about species at risk. There's a couple of birds that are really doing well and are more abundant than they were ever known to before, and one of them is merlin. And so I'm not specifically sure if merlin were susceptible to problems with DDT. My guess would be yes, because they eat birds as well. And I know they've never been really common, but they're much more common now. And another example of a bird that is now way more common than ever before is indigo bunting. So, everybody see indigo bunting? I know we see them on our road like crazy, and they're lovely, but it's just kind of different.
On the same of the insect-eating birds, I mean, is some of the problems that we're having with these species due to the migration to other countries that aren't managing pesticides?
That's part of the problem. So there's many places in the world where DDT is continuing to be used. Loss of winter habitat for a lot of these migratory birds is a conservation issue, a huge conservation issue as well. And we can control to a point what happens to their habitat here in Ontario where they breed, but when they go somewhere else, South America, Central America, whatever, we have no control, and there's issues at the wintering habitat end as well, and they need to have it all. So, yeah, it's very complicated, the problems, and then, climate change and global changes to insect populations is something else that's happening, and if you're really a beggar for punishment, you can get lots of information on the internet. They're doing some really interesting studies. It was on CBC just recently about chimney swifts and changes in insect populations, and that's pretty interesting stuff. Scary too.
Does the ministry have any resources for doing inventories on large-scale properties? I mean, you're asking for reports of sightings. I'm involved with a property that's more than 300 acres. It's got some old growth hemlocks. It's also got some former hayland, which we mow for weeds and to reduce the fire hazard, about 30 acres. But we have a very large area that the owners of this property don't even ever go to. I suspect that knowledgeable person going back and doing an inventory might find some very good things back there, but I just wonder whether, volunteer sightings are fine, but are there professional resources available through the ministry?
And not through the ministry, no. Unfortunately, this conference, for example, is all about stewardship and helping people get more of a sense about what things can be done.
Yes.
And there's a number of private companies and around that can do a really great job in providing you with that kind of technical information.
Well, maybe I should speak to you or someone and get some of those sources. We do have a forest management agreement, And we did have a forester do a forestry inventory some years back, but we've never done a wildlife study.
That might be a great idea.
Can I suggest that if you have trails through there, what you would do is you would go to the local nature club, the Muskoka Nature Club, the Huntsville Nature Club, and ask if they would like to take a walk through the property, because you often have a lot of really great naturalists, and having them, like they have bi-monthly outings that they are looking to go for walks in different places. And then they would come up with just the report that would go back to your little website thing, so.
That's what, Jeff, we have no trails. We very nearly lost people on our.
Oh. Anyway, that's a nice way to get a lot of brain power.
Okay, I appreciate those comments.
Yes?
Jan, have you, or has the ministry done a study recently of the blue heron? My experience has been that there's been a decline, particularly in the Limberlost area, where there used to be a lot of rookeries. And they would spend, obviously, their summers there. And I'm not seeing them anymore. I realize birds can move around, and they don't necessarily have to go back to the same habitat where they were before. But perceptibly, I have seen no dramatic change in that 12,000 acre reserve, and yet I don't see the evidence that I used to see of the blue heron.
That's interesting. There's no study, and I'm not
In fact,
aware.
they used to come onto my lake, for example, and I don't think I've seen one in 6 years.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm not sure whether what you're experiencing is sort of a local, I mean, you're right.
That's what I mean.
There's local changes in how animals can use their habitat, because herons are, they nest in Muskoka, they tend to nest in old beaver ponds that have become flooded with dead standing trees.
Yes.
And there's a certain lifespan to those habitats, and after which they're not great anymore, and the herons, they need to move on and find a different place. So there may be, possibly something like that is happening. But, I'm not aware of anything else, and herons are not viewed, my understanding is that they're not at the point yet where their status has been evaluated. And I'm not aware of any conservation issues particularly around them, so, it's hard to say for just
I was just kind of curious.
Yeah.
Empirical evidence and what actually.
Sometimes that's where it starts though, right?
Pardon me?
Sometimes that's where it all starts, right?
Yeah, but there's been a dramatic decline in the frog population, which is a natural feature of heron. And I'm wondering if that may be a correlation.
In the way, yeah.
You mentioned insect population changing. And has it been going down? Is that the problem, or what?
Well, I can't really talk in detail about global changes or even local changes in insect populations, but just I know enough probably to get myself in trouble that there have been a lot of changes. And I think in a nutshell it would be safe to say that birds get by depending on the same tried and true patterns of insects coming out and being available to feed upon, and then something else kicks in, and it's all been very predictable and routine for many, many millennia up until now. And now there's so many conflicting things that are causing insect populations to change, and some birds are able to adapt really well, but some just aren't. And so it's a very complicated topic, and I probably can't say anything more than that without getting into trouble. But again, that's something I'd encourage you. You can do some reading on that and know more about it.
Have you heard of any success in chimney swift, artificial chimney swift chimneys, in getting chimney swifts to use artificial chimneys?
So the whole idea of artificial chimneys was invented in the southern states, in Texas, I believe. And they put up these towers, and they did have some success there with chimney swifts using them. But in Ontario, it's been tried a lot, and we have one here in Bracebridge.
Right.
And the swifts just don't use them. And I think that Joe Nocera is an amazing scientist, if you ever have a chance to hear him talk about chimney swifts. And I think his theory is that the way Texas builds theirs doesn't work for chimney swifts here in Ontario, because needless to say, our climate is a lot different, and they're just not using them. And even in Huntsville, you know, you may have heard the story about how we built, with the Huntsville Field Naturalists, we built an artificial chimney and put it on the roof of the Algonquin Theater there.
Yeah.
You can see it.
Yeah.
Actually, if you stand on the street behind, you can look up and you can see it there. You wouldn't pay any attention to it. It does look like a real chimney,
Yeah.
but they didn't use it, which is very sad.
Did you use proper signage?
And maybe we should have. Like an arrow?
Well, if there are no more questions, we really need to give a warm round of applause.